Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you of something powerful today. You don't have to force what's meant for you. You don't have to chase, beg, or push for what God has already written in your story. When you're walking in His purpose, the doors that are meant to open will open. Not because you forced them, but because you trusted Him. Some of you are exhausted, trying to make something happen that God never asked you to push. You're fighting battles that were never yours to fight. You've forgotten that His timing is perfect, and His favor moves faster than your force ever could. So take a breath. Stop trying to control what only faith can carry. Because when you stop forcing, you start flowing, and that's when God's plan unfolds effortlessly. There comes a time in every person's life when they reach a crossroads, the place where effort meets exhaustion, where trying harder no longer works, and where human control finally reaches its limit. That's the moment when you realize something powerful. Life isn't meant to be forced, it's meant to be flowed with. Faith over force is not about giving up or being passive. It's about choosing trust over tension. It's about believing that the plan God has for you will unfold in its own divine time, without you having to break yourself to make it happen. We live in a culture that constantly tells us, make it happen. Don't stop. Keep pushing until it works. And while persistence is valuable, there's a dangerous side to forcing things that aren't ready. Forcing is driven by fear. Fear that if you don't act fast enough, you'll miss your moment. Fear that if you don't control everything, it'll fall apart. But faith is the opposite. Faith says, if it's meant for me, it will come. I don't have to fight the flow. I just have to stay aligned. Think about how nature operates. The river doesn't force itself through the mountain. It carves its way naturally, patiently, over time. The flower doesn't tear its petals open to bloom. It waits for the right season, the right sunlight, the right rain. In the same way, your life unfolds in seasons. There are times to act, and there are times to wait. And when you choose faith over force, you give yourself permission to rest in that rhythm. So many people are worn out not because they're lazy, but because they're fighting battles that were never theirs to fight. They're trying to open doors that were never theirs to enter. They're pushing, begging, striving, and stressing, thinking that their power can replace God's plan. But the truth is, what's meant for you won't need to be forced. When you're aligned with divine timing, things start to fall into place in ways you couldn't have planned, predicted, or pressured into happening. Faith over force is trusting that the delay is not a denial. It's knowing that if something isn't working right now, maybe it's not supposed to, not yet. Maybe God is protecting you from something you can't see. Maybe He's preparing the right opportunity or refining you so you can handle the blessing when it comes. We've all experienced moments when we tried to force something, a relationship, a job, a plan, and no matter how hard we tried, it just wouldn't work. Then, later on, something better appeared, something that made us realize why it didn't work before. That's divine timing. That's grace. When you start walking in faith instead of force, your energy shifts. You move from anxiety to peace. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start trusting in alignment. You begin to say, if it's meant for me, it will flow to me. If not, it was never mine to begin with. That mindset doesn't just bring peace, it brings power. Because you're no longer driven by fear of missing out, you're anchored in trust. Faith over force also teaches patience. Not the kind of patience that waits passively, but the kind that works faithfully. It's the kind of patience that says, I'm going to do my part, but I trust God with the results. It's understanding that you can plant the seed, but only He can make it grow. You can prepare the ground, but you can't control the rain. And here's the beauty of it. When you stop forcing and start trusting, you make room for grace to work. You give space for divine alignment. Suddenly, doors open without strain. Opportunities appear unexpectedly. People come into your life at just the right time. Everything starts to connect because you've surrendered control to the one who actually holds the plan. Faith doesn't mean you won't work hard. It means you won't worry hard. You'll move forward with peace in your heart instead of panic in your mind. You'll act with clarity, not desperation. And you'll find that life begins to unfold more smoothly, more naturally, more beautifully than when you were trying to force it. There is power in peace. There is strength in surrender. The moment you stop trying to make everything happen your way, you create space for God to make things happen His way. And His way is always higher, better, and more perfect than yours. So if something in your life feels stuck, if no matter how hard you try it won't move, take a step back. Breathe, release the pressure. That may be God's gentle way of saying, this isn't your battle. This isn't your moment. Yet, when the time is right, you won't have to push. You won't have to chase. You won't have to force. Things will start flowing effortlessly, peacefully, divinely. Because what's meant for you is already written. You don't need to fight for it. You just need to have faith over force. One of the hardest lessons in life is learning how to let go of control. From the moment we're old enough to dream, we're taught to take charge, to plan, to push, to make things happen. But there comes a time when no matter how carefully you plan or how hard you try, life simply doesn't go the way you imagined. And that's when the real test begins. Not a test of strength, but a test of surrender. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means finally realizing that you were never supposed to carry the weight of the entire world on your shoulders. It's about understanding that some things are not yours to manage, fix, or force. They belong to God. When we try to control everything, what we're really doing is saying, I don't trust the process. I don't trust the timing. I don't trust God enough to handle this. We dress it up as ambition or responsibility, but deep down, control often comes from fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of the unknown. Yet faith begins where control ends. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you finally stop trying to hold everything together on your own. When you exhale, unclench your fists and say, I don't have to understand everything right now. I just need to trust. That's when you step into real strength, not the kind that comes from pushing harder, but the kind that comes from trusting deeper. Life has a rhythm, moments of doing and moments of waiting, moments of holding on and moments of letting go. When you try to control every detail, you interrupt that rhythm. You resist the flow of what's natural, what's divine. You end up drained, frustrated, and spiritually exhausted because you're trying to play the role of God instead of letting God be God. Sometimes the reason things aren't working out the way you want is because they're not supposed to. Not yet, or not in that form. Maybe that door closed to protect you. Maybe that plan fell apart so something better could take its place. Maybe the very thing you thought you lost was never meant to stay. When you stop trying to control everything, you start to notice something miraculous. Peace. You begin to see how life unfolds with meaning, how the pieces connect in ways you couldn't have orchestrated. You start to recognize divine timing at work. You see how certain people, opportunities, and moments show up exactly when you're ready for them, not a second earlier, not a second later. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start trusting. It means you do your best and then allow God to handle what's beyond your reach. You take the next right step, not because you know where it will lead, but because you trust the one who's guiding you. There's a quote that says, "When you let go of control, you make room for miracles." And it's true. Miracles happen in the space where your will ends and God's will begins. When you loosen your grip on how things should be, you open your heart to what could be. And often, what could be is far greater than what you imagined. You don't have to understand every twist in the road. You don't need to have all the answers. All you need is faith, faith that the delay has purpose, faith that the silence has meaning, faith that God is working even in the waiting. Letting go is an act of courage. It's easy to hold on to what's familiar, even when it's heavy. But real freedom begins when you say, "I trust you more than I trust my plan." It's the moment when your soul stops wrestling and starts resting. You'll know you're growing when peace matters more than control. You'll know you're healing when you no longer need to know every detail, when you can simply wake up and say, "Whatever happens today, I know I'm guided." Let go of trying to fix what's already in divine hands. Let go of overthinking every move. Let go of the idea that you have to make it all happen by yourself. When you release control, you release anxiety, you release fear. You release the illusion that you're in charge of every outcome. And in that release, you'll find something priceless: freedom. Freedom to live. Freedom to breathe. Freedom to trust that even when life doesn't go according to your plan, it's still going according to God's. So stop trying to control the uncontrollable. Stop forcing what's not flowing. Stop fighting the very process that's shaping you into who you're meant to be. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let go, not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that God's plan is better than your own. Let go of control and watch peace flow into the places where pressure used to live. Because when you stop trying to control everything, you finally start to live in alignment with the one who controls it all. There's a simple truth that brings both peace and power to life. You are responsible for your effort, not the outcome. Too often, we try to control both. We work, we plan, we push, and then we stress when things don't unfold exactly the way we imagined. But life wasn't designed that way. Your job is to do your part, to show up, to stay faithful, to keep moving forward, and then to trust that God will take care of the rest. This principle, do your part, then trust, is about balance. It's about knowing where your responsibility ends and where God's begins. It's understanding that you are called to act, but not to overthink. You are called to plant the seed, but not to control the rain. When you try to do everything by yourself, you carry a weight that was never yours to bear. You begin to feel tired, anxious, even discouraged, because deep down, you're trying to play the role of both worker and creator. But faith teaches a different rhythm, one that combines action with surrender. You do what's in your hands, and you trust God with what's in His. There's something powerful about a person who does their best every day, but still sleeps peacefully at night. That kind of peace comes from trust, from knowing that you've given your all, and that the rest is out of your control. It's the peace that says, I've done my part. Now it's in God's hands. Doing your part doesn't mean overworking or burning out. It means being faithful with what you have today, showing up with consistency, integrity, and excellence. It means using your gifts, speaking life into your dreams, being prepared when opportunities come. Because faith doesn't work without movement. God blesses steps, not stagnation. But after you've done your part, after you've given your best, there comes a moment when you must release it. You must trust that the seed you planted will grow, even when you can't see it yet. You must believe that the timing, the growth, and the outcome are not in your hands, but in God's. This is where many people struggle, not with working, but with waiting. We live in a generation that's addicted to results, to instant feedback, to fast success. But spiritual growth doesn't follow that pattern. God's timing rarely fits our schedule because His plan is about development, not just delivery. Sometimes the waiting is what makes you ready. Sometimes the quiet season is what builds your strength. Sometimes the delay is what develops your faith. So when things seem slow or uncertain, don't assume God has forgotten you. Maybe He's simply working behind the scenes, arranging, aligning, and preparing something greater than you expected. You may not see it yet, but your consistency is not wasted. Your effort is not in vain. Every prayer, every small step, every act of obedience is adding up in ways that your eyes can't yet see. That's the beauty of trust. It gives you peace even in the unseen. When you do your part, you're saying, God, I'm ready. When you trust Him with the rest, you're saying, God, I believe. Those two things, readiness and belief, open the door for miracles. Because God doesn't need your stress, He needs your faith. He doesn't want your fear, He wants your trust. Think about the farmer who plants a seed. He doesn't dig it up every morning to check if it's growing. He waters it, protects it, and trusts that in time it will break through the soil. That's what doing your part, then trusting, looks like in real life. You take action, you stay faithful, but you don't let worry choke the growth. You can't force fruit to appear before its season. You can't rush what's divine. But you can prepare your heart, your mindset, and your habits so that when the season of blessing arrives, you're ready to receive it. So if you're in a season where things seem uncertain, keep doing your part. Keep showing up. Keep giving your best. Keep believing that something good is on the way. And when you've done all you can, stop stressing about the rest. Because the truth is, God doesn't need your control. He needs your cooperation. He wants you to participate, not panic. He wants you to move, but also to trust. When you finally understand that your only real job is to be faithful with what you can do, peace starts to replace pressure. The anxiety begins to fade. The waiting becomes a little easier, because deep down, you know you've done your part, and God, in His perfect time, will do His. Rejection is one of life's greatest teachers, and one of its most misunderstood gifts. At first, it hurts. It stings. It makes you question your worth, your path, and sometimes even your faith. But what if rejection isn't punishment at all? What if rejection is God's way of saying, this isn't the way. I have something better for you. We've all faced moments when doors closed that we desperately wanted to open, relationships that ended before we were ready, opportunities that slipped away, plans that crumbled after we gave them everything we had. And in those moments, it's easy to feel forgotten. It's easy to think, why would God let this happen? But often, the very door you're crying over was never meant to be yours in the first place. Rejection is not the end of your story. It's a turning point. It's not God taking something from you. It's God protecting you, redirecting you, preparing you for something greater than you could have imagined. Sometimes the reason you didn't get what you wanted is because you were thinking too small. You wanted good, but God had great. You wanted comfort, but He had calling. You were focused on what you could see, but He was preparing what you couldn't. Rejection hurts because we confuse it with failure. We think if something doesn't work out, it means we weren't enough. But that's not true. What if you didn't fail? What if you were simply being guided? Think about how navigation works. When you take a wrong turn, the GPS doesn't yell, "You failed." It simply says, "Recalculating." It redirects you, not to punish you, but to lead you back toward the right route. That's what God does with rejection. Every no, every disappointment, every missed chance is His divine recalculation. When you're in alignment with faith, you start to see closed doors differently. Instead of saying, "Why didn't it happen?" you begin to say, "Thank you for protecting me from what wasn't meant for me." Because truthfully, you don't want everything you think you want. Some of the things you're praying for right now could actually delay your purpose or distract your peace. Rejection often clears space for what's meant to arrive. If the wrong door never closed, the right one couldn't open. If the wrong person never walked away, the right person couldn't walk in. Every no creates room for the yes that truly fits your life. It's hard to see it when you're in the middle of the pain. When the plan falls apart, you don't feel grateful. You feel lost. But if you look back over your life, you'll realize that some of the best things that ever happened to you started with something not going your way. The job you didn't get led you to a better opportunity. The person who left made space for someone who truly values you. The plan that fell apart forced you to find your true purpose. That's the power of divine redirection. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it feels like loss, but it's actually love. God's love steering you toward your destiny. Rejection builds resilience. It refines your faith. It teaches you to depend on something greater than your own understanding. It's a reminder that your value isn't determined by acceptance. It's defined by purpose. Every time you're rejected, you have two choices. You can shrink back and let bitterness take root, or you can rise up and let faith take over. You can say, "This hurts, but it's not the end. Something better is coming." That kind of mindset turns pain into power. God never closes one door without preparing another. But sometimes He doesn't open it right away, not because He's punishing you, but because He's preparing you. There are lessons in every no that get you ready for your yes. There's growth in the delay that builds the strength you'll need when the opportunity finally comes. So if you're facing rejection right now, take heart. Don't let it make you bitter. Let it make you better. Don't see it as a wall. See it as a signpost pointing you in a new direction. The path you planned may not be the path you walk, but the destination will be worth it. You are not being blocked. You're being redirected. You are not being overlooked. You're being protected. You are not being delayed. You're being developed. Rejection doesn't mean you're forgotten. It means you're being guided by a God who sees the whole picture. A God who knows what's ahead, what you need, and what you can't yet see. So when doors close, don't fight them. Thank them. Because those very doors may be saving you from something that would have broken you, distracted you, or kept you from your true purpose. Sometimes God's greatest gift is not what He gives, but what He withholds. And in time, when the right door opens, you'll understand why every rejection had to happen exactly the way it did. Because rejection isn't the end. It's redirection, and redirection always leads to destiny. We live in a world that worships speed. Everything around us screams, now! Fast food, fast results, fast success. We want things instantly, answers, breakthroughs, blessings, everything. But God doesn't work on human deadlines. His timing is perfect, not pressured. And sometimes, when it feels like life is standing still, it's not because you've been denied. It's because you're being developed. Delay doesn't mean denial. It means preparation. When you pray for something and it doesn't happen right away, it's easy to feel discouraged. You start to wonder, did God forget about me? Did I do something wrong? Why is everyone else moving forward while I'm stuck waiting? But the truth is, God hasn't forgotten you. He's just not finished with what He's building in you. Sometimes the delay is not about the blessing. It's about the becoming. You're not being denied, you're being shaped. You're being stretched, refined, and strengthened for what's ahead. When a seed is planted, there's a silent season where nothing seems to be happening on the surface. You water it, care for it, wait, but the soil looks still. Underground, though that seed is breaking, growing roots, and preparing to rise. That's what your waiting season is like. You may not see visible progress, but God is doing unseen work. We often confuse silence with absence. But just because God is quiet doesn't mean He's distant. Just because you can't see progress doesn't mean there isn't movement. Sometimes the quiet seasons are the most important ones, the seasons where your faith is tested, where patience is built, and where character is formed. If everything came instantly, you wouldn't learn trust. You wouldn't learn resilience. You wouldn't understand the beauty of divine timing. The waiting seasons teach you to depend on something greater than yourself, to believe even when you can't see, and to trust even when you don't understand. Delay also protects you. Sometimes you're not ready for what you're praying for. If God gave you everything you asked for right now, it might overwhelm you, distract you, or even destroy what He's trying to build through you. He delays because He loves you too much to deliver something you're not ready to carry. Think about this. A blessing given too soon can feel like a burden. A relationship given before maturity can cause heartbreak. A dream achieved without wisdom can crumble under pressure. That's why God waits until your heart, your mindset, and your spirit are strong enough to hold the weight of what He has planned. There's purpose in the pause. Every waiting season has a reason. You might not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and realize the delay was never wasted. It taught you things that success never could. It taught you how to pray deeper, how to be patient, how to find peace even when nothing seems to move. Some doors take longer to open because what's behind them requires more preparation. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. God is aligning people, opportunities, and circumstances behind the scenes, things you can't yet see, so when the moment comes, everything fits perfectly. It's easy to praise God when everything's happening fast. But the real faith shows up in the waiting, when you keep believing, keep working, and keep trusting even when it looks like nothing is happening. That's the kind of faith that moves mountains. If you're in a season of delay right now, don't lose hope. Don't let comparison steal your peace. Someone else's timeline is not your timeline. What's meant for you is on the way, not early, not late, but exactly when you're ready to receive it. The waiting season isn't wasted time, it's training time. It's where you grow roots of faith strong enough to handle the storms of life. And when the breakthrough comes, you'll appreciate it more because of the time it took. Remember this, the promise still stands. Just because it's taking longer than you expected doesn't mean it's not coming. God's delays are never denials. They're often disguised blessings. He's working in ways you don't see, moving pieces you can't imagine, and preparing a path that's better than what you planned. So stop worrying about how long it's taking. Stop doubting if it will happen. Keep showing up. Keep trusting. Keep watering your faith even when you can't see the growth yet. Because one day, when everything aligns, it'll happen suddenly. And you'll realize it was worth the wait. Every "not yet" is really God saying, I'm still preparing the way. Delay isn't the end. It's the middle, the sacred in between where God turns your waiting into wisdom and your patience into power. So hold on, stay faithful, keep believing, because the moment He says, now, everything you've prayed for will unfold, not by your timing, but by His perfect design. Delay doesn't mean denial. It means destiny in progress. Faith isn't sitting still and hoping something happens. It's moving forward even when you don't see the full picture. Real faith is not lazy, it's alive, moving, breathing, and working even in uncertainty. It's the quiet confidence that says, I don't know how, but I know who. We often think of faith as waiting, as sitting on the sidelines until God shows up with an answer. But faith isn't waiting with your hands folded. It's walking forward with your heart open. It's doing what you can with what you have while trusting God to take care of the rest. Faith is not about control, it's about cooperation. It means partnering with God, not trying to manipulate outcomes, but aligning your actions with His direction. You take a step, He clears the path. You sow the seed, He sends the rain, faith says. I'll move first, even if I can't see the finish line. Because true trust isn't tested when things are clear. It's tested when everything looks uncertain. When you walk by faith, you stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop saying, once everything is in place, I'll start. No, faith starts before it makes sense. Faith builds the ark before it rains. Faith steps into the water before it parts. Faith moves, and then God moves through it. Active trust is not blind, it's obedient. You may not know the destination, but you trust the direction. You don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step. That's faith. That's courage wrapped in surrender. Some people mistake faith for passivity. They think it means sitting back and letting life happen. But faith is deeply active. It's showing up to work every day, even when you don't see progress. It's loving people who don't always love you back. It's praying for a miracle and then preparing like it's already on the way. Faith is doing your part in trusting God with the part you can't do. You don't plant a seed and then sit there impatiently tapping your foot, wondering why it hasn't grown. You plant it, water it, and trust the process. That's faith, working with hope while waiting on the unseen. Active faith is about alignment. You can't say you trust God and still live driven by fear. You can't say you believe in His promises and still make choices rooted in panic. Faith requires congruence, your words, your actions, and your mindset all moving in the same direction of belief. You can't just speak faith, you have to walk faith. Speak it, believe it, act on it. That's how heaven and earth align. When you practice active trust, you start seeing delays differently. You stop panicking when things don't move fast enough because you know God's hand is still at work. You stop forcing outcomes because you understand what's meant for you will never require manipulation. Faith lets you breathe again. It takes the pressure off your shoulders and places it back where it belongs, in God's hands. It allows you to rest, knowing that your obedience is enough. You don't have to push every door open. Sometimes all you have to do is knock. It's easy to have faith when the path is straight. But what about when it twists, when the lights go out, when the plan falls apart? That's when real faith rises. The faith that keeps you standing when everything else tells you to give up. Active trust means you move through fear instead of waiting for it to disappear. You take the step while your knees are shaking. You choose faith in the middle of the storm, not after it clears. Because the truth is, if you only trust when things are easy, that's not faith, that's comfort. Faith grows strongest in uncertainty. Every time you choose to trust God in the unknown, your spirit gets stronger. You begin to realize that faith isn't about getting what you want. It's about becoming who you're meant to be through the process. It's not about outcomes. It's about transformation. Faith teaches you endurance, patience, and peace. It reminds you that even when nothing seems to move, God's promises are still alive. It's an anchor that holds you steady when life shakes you. And faith always acts. It doesn't wait for a guarantee. It doesn't demand signs. It simply believes and moves. Every miracle you've ever heard about in Scripture started with someone who acted on faith before the evidence appeared. Abraham stepped out without a map. Moses raised his staff before the sea split. Peter stepped out of the boat before the water turned solid. Their faith wasn't passive. It was motion in trust. That's what God asks of you, too. Not to have it all figured out, but to keep walking when you don't. To believe that every step of obedience draws you closer to breakthrough. Faith is active trust, and trust is powerful. It invites God into the details of your life. It transforms fear into fuel and waiting into worship. It shifts your perspective from, I have to figure it out, to God already has it figured out. So, don't wait for everything to make sense before you move. Faith rarely makes sense in the beginning. It only makes sense when you look back and see how every step connected. Keep trusting. Keep walking. Keep believing. Even when the evidence isn't there yet, because faith that moves your feet will always move mountains. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop chasing what isn't meant for you. When you stop forcing doors open that God has already closed. When you realize that the things meant for you, the people, opportunities, and blessings don't need to be wrestled into existence. They come naturally. They come with ease. They come with peace. That's what it means when we say, the right things come effortlessly. It doesn't mean you won't work hard. It doesn't mean you won't face challenges. It means you won't have to force what's divinely aligned. There's a difference between effort and force. Effort is healthy. It's energy guided by faith. Force is fear disguised as control. Effort flows. Force fights. When you're operating in alignment with God's plan, things begin to unfold with a sense of rhythm. You'll notice that certain doors open without you pushing. Certain conversations happen at the right time. Certain opportunities show up when you stop striving and start trusting. That's the beauty of divine timing. It doesn't rush and it doesn't struggle. It just flows. Think about it. When something isn't meant for you, no matter how hard you try, It just won't stick. You'll feel constant resistance, confusion, and exhaustion. But when something is meant for you, even the challenges along the way will feel purposeful, not chaotic. There will be peace even in the process. God never designed your blessings to drain you. The things that are meant for you will not require you to sacrifice your peace, your values, or your identity to keep them. If you have to constantly beg, chase, or prove your worth to make something stay, it's not from God. It's from striving. When you're in alignment, life starts to feel lighter. You move differently. You stop begging and start believing. You stop chasing and start attracting. That doesn't mean you stop working. It means your work becomes guided by wisdom instead of worry. You're no longer hustling out of fear that you'll miss something. You're moving with calm confidence, knowing that what's yours can't be lost. There's a supernatural ease that comes with divine alignment. It's not about perfection. It's about peace. It's when you can look at your life and say, even though I don't have all the answers, I feel peace about where I'm going. That peace is your confirmation. That stillness in your spirit, that's God whispering. You're right where you need to be. Many people mistake chaos for progress. They think if they're not constantly busy, they're falling behind. But the truth is, frantic energy doesn't create blessings. Faith does. You can't rush what's sacred. What's meant for you will come with grace, not grind. When you stop forcing, you start flowing. And in that flow, you find balance. You start seeing that some things were never supposed to be yours. Not because you're not good enough, but because they would have kept you from what truly is. Sometimes God blocks your plans because He's protecting your purpose. He'll let something fall apart so something better can fall into place. That's not failure. That's alignment. You might have worked for something for years and watched it collapse. You might have poured your heart into a relationship, a dream, or an opportunity that didn't work out. But if it required constant chaos to maintain, it was never sustainable. God doesn't bless what breaks you to keep. The right things will not confuse you. They will confirm you. They won't drain your spirit. They'll strengthen it. They won't make you question your worth. They'll remind you of it. When God brings something into your life, it will come with peace attached. It will come with clarity, not confusion. It may still challenge you, but it will never cost your peace to pursue it. That's the effortless flow, the one that comes from trusting instead of striving. Think about how nature operates. The sun doesn't strain to shine. The river doesn't fight to flow. The flowers don't struggle to bloom. Everything in creation moves according to divine rhythm. You too were created to move that way, not through force, but through flow. The more you trust, the less you have to control. The more you surrender, the lighter life becomes. You start to see that everything you used to chase starts coming to you. Not because you're lucky, but because you're aligned. When your heart is in the right place and your faith is steady, God begins to orchestrate things behind the scenes. He sends the right people, the right opportunities, and the right moments, not when you're desperate, but when you're ready. So if something feels forced, take that as a sign to pause. Not every good thing is a God thing. Ask yourself, does this bring me peace or pressure? Because peace is always a sign of God's presence. Pressure, the kind that suffocates your joy, is a sign that you're pushing too hard. The right things will fit your life without you having to shrink yourself to make them fit. They will align naturally with who you are and what you're meant to become. You won't have to chase them. You'll just have to recognize them. Because when something is truly meant for you, it won't come through chaos, it will come through calm. It won't require you to beg, it will respond to your belief. The right things come effortlessly, not because life is easy, but because peace is proof of purpose. So take a deep breath, stop striving, stop forcing, step into the flow of grace. What's meant for you is already on its way, and it won't require you to lose yourself to receive it. Overthinking is one of the easiest ways to drain your peace and block your blessings. It's the silent storm in your mind that convinces you something's wrong when nothing is. It's the endless cycle of what-ifs that keeps you stuck in fear instead of moving in faith. We do it without realizing, replaying conversations, second-guessing decisions, trying to predict outcomes that only God controls. We analyze every detail, thinking we're being wise, but in truth, we're just exhausting our spirit. Overthinking is a form of self-protection. It's your mind's way of trying to create safety in a world that feels uncertain. But the irony is, the more you try to control everything, the more anxious you feel. You can't find peace in control. You find peace in trust. Letting go of overthinking doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what was never yours to fix. It's realizing that not every question needs an answer right now, and not every path needs to be mapped out before you move. God doesn't give you the whole picture because He wants you to walk by faith, not by sight. If you knew every twist and turn, you'd never learn to trust His voice. Overthinking tries to replace faith with logic. But faith doesn't live in logic, it lives in surrender. You can't think your way into peace. You can only trust your way into peace. The truth is, most of what you're worrying about never even happens. The mind creates scenarios that don't exist because it's uncomfortable with the unknown. But uncertainty is where God does His best work. It's where miracles unfold. When you stop trying to figure everything out, you make room for divine flow. You open your heart for God to move in ways you didn't expect. Sometimes your mind says, "There's no way," while your spirit whispers, "Watch what God can do." Overthinking is loud. Faith is quiet. The mind screams, the soul knows. You can't hear divine direction through mental noise. That's why stillness is sacred. When you calm your thoughts and simply breathe, you make space for God to speak. Not in chaos, but in calm. Let go of needing to know how everything will turn out. You don't have to have the plan. You just need to trust the one who does. When you surrender overthinking, you shift from panic to peace. You stop replaying the past and start preparing for what's next. You stop doubting yourself and start depending on God. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Overthinking keeps you in yesterday and drags you out of the present. It makes you miss today's blessings because you're too focused on tomorrow's worries. But Jesus said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." When you truly trust that God's hand is over your life, you stop trying to control every detail. You realize that even your mistakes, your detours, your delays, they're all part of the plan. There's beauty in not knowing. There's freedom in releasing control. Imagine how light your spirit would feel if you stopped trying to solve everything and just said, "God, I trust you." Imagine waking up and choosing peace over panic, choosing faith over fear, choosing surrender over stress. That's where true freedom begins. When you let go of overthinking, you make room for creativity, clarity, and divine guidance. You stop reacting out of fear and start responding with faith. You become more aware, more present, more aligned with what God is doing right now, you'll start to notice that the answers you were chasing begin to come naturally, not through stress, but through stillness. Because peace attracts clarity. When your mind is quiet, your spirit can hear. And what your spirit hears will always lead you toward purpose. Overthinking says, I have to figure it out. Faith says, God's already worked it out. Overthinking says, what if I fail? Faith says, even if I fall, God will lift me again. Overthinking says, what if it doesn't work? Faith says, if it's meant for me, it can't miss me. When you shift from overthinking to trusting, everything changes. You start walking lighter. You stop wasting energy on fear and start investing energy in faith. You begin to realize that peace isn't the result of everything going perfectly. Peace is the result of trusting God, even when things don't. So breathe. Let the anxious thoughts fall away. You don't need to replay every outcome. Just rest in the knowledge that you're being guided by something greater than your logic. God doesn't need your constant analysis. He needs your confidence. The mind will always want control, but the spirit will always want connection. Choose connection. Choose trust. Choose to rest instead of wrestle. Letting go of overthinking doesn't mean you give up. It means you grow up in faith. It means you understand that trying to control everything is not your job, believing that God will is. So the next time your thoughts start spiraling, pause and say, God, I release this. I trust your timing. I trust your wisdom. And I trust your plan. You'll feel the weight lift instantly. Because peace always follows surrender. The more you let go, the more you'll see God was handling it all along. Let go of overthinking. Let peace lead. Because peace is the evidence of faith in motion. There comes a moment in life when you realize that no amount of effort, talent, or planning can produce what only God's grace can. You can work harder, try longer, and push stronger. But there are doors that won't move until grace turns the handle. Grace is that divine force that steps in when human effort reaches its limit. It's what causes things to happen that logic can't explain. It's when opportunities appear out of nowhere, when favor finds you in places you never expected, when what was impossible suddenly unfolds effortlessly. Grace isn't something you earn, it's something you receive. It's not a reward for perfection. It's a gift for faith. So many of us lie exhausted, thinking that if we just work harder or try more, everything will finally click. We run ourselves into burnout, convinced that success is only about hustle. But grace reminds us that God's favor can accomplish in a moment what your effort can't do in a lifetime. That doesn't mean effort doesn't matter. It means effort alone isn't enough. You plant, you water, you show up, but it's God who brings the increase. You don't have to strive your way into blessings that were meant to flow through grace. You don't have to beg for what God has already written into your story. When grace shows up, everything shifts. The waiting ends. The impossible opens. Have you ever noticed how some moments feel divinely timed? You meet the right person at the right place. A door that's been locked for years suddenly swings open. A prayer you almost gave up on finally gets answered. That's not coincidence. That's grace. Grace is God's yes where the world said no. It's favor that breaks barriers and changes outcomes. Your effort can take you places, but grace will take you further. Effort is limited to what you can do. Grace works on what God can do, and His power is unlimited. Grace makes things happen that you couldn't plan if you tried. It's the phone call that changes your career, the opportunity that comes when you stopped striving, the peace that fills your heart when you finally release control. You see, effort is about control. Grace is about surrender. Effort says, if I work harder, I can make it happen. Grace says, if I trust God, He'll make it happen in ways I never could. Sometimes God withholds results when we're relying too much on ourselves, not to punish us, but to teach us dependence. Because when you rely solely on your strength, you carry the pressure. But when you rely on His grace, you walk in peace. Grace does what hustle never can. It aligns you with divine timing. In grace, you don't have to chase. You're chosen. You don't have to push. You're positioned. You don't have to beg. You simply believe. That's why Scripture says, it's not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit. It's not about how strong you are. It's about how surrendered you are. When grace opens a door, no one can close it. When grace calls your name, no one can compete for your place. When grace covers you, failure can't define you, and fear can't stop you. Grace doesn't remove effort. It blesses it. It multiplies it. It adds divine acceleration to human obedience. Maybe you've been working hard for something, praying, planning, doing everything right, and it still hasn't happened. Don't be discouraged. It's not because you're not enough. It's because God is waiting for the perfect moment when your effort and His grace meet. That's when miracles happen. Grace doesn't mean you do nothing. It means you do your part and you trust God with the rest. You stay faithful, but you stop forcing. You keep building, but you stop stressing. You keep believing, but you stop worrying about when. Because when the time is right, grace will open doors that effort couldn't budge. It might be a promotion you didn't apply for, a relationship that restores itself, a dream that revives after years of silence. That's what grace does. It breathes life into what looks dead. You can't force grace, and you can't fake it. You can only receive it by faith. Grace works quietly. It doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it's in the small shifts, the unexpected peace, the subtle opportunity, the conversation that leads to breakthrough. The world teaches you to push harder. God teaches you to trust deeper. When grace steps in, striving steps out. When grace covers you, effort becomes effortless. When grace moves, things align that never could before. So today, rest a little more in grace. Stop trying to earn what's already been promised. Stop trying to figure out every detail. Just say, God, I've done all I can. Now I trust you to do what I can't. And grace will meet you there, in the place where your effort ends and your faith begins. Because grace is not the absence of work, it's the presence of God's hand in your work. It's the divine breath that takes your ordinary and makes it extraordinary. When you live from grace, doors open faster, peace lasts longer, and burdens feel lighter. You realize that you were never meant to carry the weight of doing everything alone. So breathe, trust, and let grace go before you. Because the truth is, when God's grace opens a door, no amount of effort could have forced it, and no amount of opposition can close it. Grace does what effort can't, and once you experience that, you'll never go back to striving. You'll live in surrender, peace, and divine flow. In a world obsessed with speed, patience has become a lost art. Everything around us tells us to hurry, to move faster, achieve sooner, and never wait. But in God's kingdom, waiting is not wasted time. Waiting is where faith grows roots. Patience isn't weakness. It's strength under control. It's the quiet confidence that says, I may not see it yet, but I know it's coming. Patience is the true evidence of faith. Because anyone can believe when results are immediate, But real faith is proven when nothing seems to be happening, when doors stay closed, prayers feel unanswered, and life seems still. That's where patience becomes powerful. Patience says, I trust God's timing more than my own. It's surrender disguised as stillness. It's believing that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. It just means it's not time. We often think patience is passive, but it's not. Patience is active trust. It's choosing peace while you wait. It's showing up every day, doing your part, and letting God handle the rest. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every few hours to check if it's growing. You water it, nurture it, and wait, because you trust the process. That's what faith looks like, believing in the unseen, trusting in the timing, and waiting without panic. God's promises don't expire, but they do require patience. Every great story in Scripture involved waiting. Abraham waited decades for his promise. Joseph waited years in prison before promotion. David was anointed as king, but waited through battles and betrayal before wearing the crown. Even Jesus waited until the appointed time to reveal his purpose. If they had to wait and still saw victory, then your waiting season is not a punishment. It's preparation. Patience is proof that you trust God even when the clock is ticking. It's proof that your faith isn't built on feelings, but on conviction. When everything in you wants to rush, but you choose to rest, that's faith in its purest form. Impatience is born from fear. Fear that it won't happen, fear that God forgot, fear that you're falling behind. But patience is born from faith, faith that says, even if it's taking longer, I'm still on track. Patience doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It means you stop doubting. You don't quit. You quiet your spirit and remind yourself, God is working while I'm waiting. Waiting isn't empty. It's sacred. It's in the waiting that God builds your character, matures your heart, and prepares you for what's next. If He gave you everything you asked for right now, you might not be ready to hold it. Patience gives you the capacity to sustain the blessing when it arrives. When you rush God, you risk receiving something before its time, and anything received too early can turn into a burden. But when you wait on His timing, blessings arrive fully formed and perfectly aligned. Patience protects you from premature blessings. It trains your heart to value process over pressure. Because the truth is, timing is everything, and God's timing is always perfect. You may feel like nothing is happening right now, but something is always happening beneath the surface. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean God isn't moving. He's aligning people, opening doors, and preparing your path in ways you can't yet imagine. The waiting season is not a delay, it's divine strategy. So instead of asking, when God? Start asking, what are you teaching me while I wait? A patience turns waiting into wisdom. It transforms anxiety into anticipation. It shifts your focus from how long to what's being built within me. When you wait with faith, you're declaring that your trust is bigger than your timeline. You're saying, even if it takes longer, I'll still believe. Even if it looks impossible, I'll still praise. Even if nothing changes today, I know it will in time. And here's the beautiful truth. When you learn to wait well, you stop comparing your journey to others. You stop rushing your process to match someone else's progress. You start realizing that your story has its own rhythm, its own timing, its own divine pace. Patience teaches you peace. It teaches you gratitude. It teaches you how to enjoy the now without obsessing over the next. Sometimes God delays the blessing not to test your faith, but to develop your faith. because what's coming requires maturity, strength, and endurance, and those grow in the soil of patience. Every time you choose patience over panic, your faith deepens. Every time you trust instead of complain, you prove your faith is real. Every time you wait without giving up, heaven takes notice. Patience is not a pause, it's progress in disguise. When you finally receive what you've been praying for, you'll look back and realize that the waiting season wasn't about what you were waiting for. It was about who you were becoming through it. So take heart. Don't rush what God is still refining. Don't force what He's still forming. Don't doubt what He's still developing. Patience is not about standing still. It's about standing firm. It's faith stretched over time. It's believing that even in silence, God is still speaking. When you live with that kind of trust, peace becomes your rhythm and faith becomes your strength. Because patience isn't just waiting, it's worshiping while you wait. Patience is proof of faith, and faith in its truest form always waits well.